Right now, at this exact moment, International Atomic Energy inspectors are conducting emergency verification protocols at a shattered compound in northern Tehran that until 18 hours ago served as Iran's primary nuclear command and control facility. Israel's military spokesperson announced just after midnight that precision-guided munitions struck what they call the nerve center of Iran's nuclear weapons program. The International Atomic Energy Agency released a terse statement 40 minutes ago, confirming structural damage to facilities under their monitoring jurisdiction. Iran's supreme leader has not been seen publicly since the strike. This is the first time in history that a nation has conducted a kinetic military attack on nuclear command infrastructure while international inspectors were physically present in the same country. Either Israel has just prevented Iran from achieving nuclear weapons capability, or Israel has just guaranteed that Iran will now sprint toward the bomb with nothing left to lose. Let me walk you through exactly what happened in the last 24 hours, because the timeline reveals strategic calculation that goes far beyond a simple military strike. At 0230 hours local time on March 7, 2026, air defense radar operators at Iran's Qatam al-Anbiya air defense base southeast of Tehran detected multiple low-altitude contacts approaching Iranian airspace from the west. At 0241 hours, operators identified the signatures as consistent with Israeli Air Force F-35I Adir stealth fighters, the advanced variant specifically configured for deep penetration strikes. Iran's integrated air defense network, anchored by Russian-supplied S-300 systems, attempted target locks, but the stealth profile combined with electronic warfare jamming degraded tracking capability. At 0253 hours, precision-guided GBU-72 bunker-buster munitions impacted a compound in Tehran's Lavazan district, a facility that satellite imagery providers have tracked for 8 years as the suspected headquarters of Iran's nuclear weapons design organization. The munitions penetrated approximately 40 meters of reinforced concrete and detonated in underground levels that Iran has consistently claimed contain conventional military research laboratories. At 0312 hours, secondary explosions erupted from the compound, suggesting stored materials or equipment experienced catastrophic failure. Iranian air defense batteries launched 17 surface-to-air missiles at the departing Israeli aircraft. Israel Defense Forces confirmed all strike aircraft returned safely to base. At 0430 hours, the International Atomic Energy Agency's Emergency Operations Center in Vienna received automated radiation monitoring alerts from sensors positioned around the Lavazan facility as part of Iran's nuclear non-proliferation treaty obligations. At 0547 hours, Iran's foreign ministry issued a statement calling the strike an act of war and promising retaliation of unprecedented magnitude. At 0620 hours, the IAEA released preliminary confirmation that one of their monitored facilities had sustained damage from military action and that inspectors would conduct emergency verification within 48 hours. To understand the strategic significance, you need to understand what Israel actually hit and the weapon systems employed to accomplish a mission this audacious. The Lavazan Shi'an compound represents far more than a research laboratory. Western intelligence agencies assess with high confidence that this facility houses the central coordination hub for Iran's nuclear weapons development program, formerly designated the Organization for Defensive Innovation and Research, but known within intelligence circles as the Ahmad Program Continuation. The compound consists of surface structures covering approximately 6 hectares, but the critical infrastructure extends underground in hardened bunkers constructed between 2012 and 2018 specifically to resist conventional bombing. The deepest levels, estimated at 50 to 60 meters below surface, contain the advanced centrifuge research and development workshops, weapons design laboratories, and the computer system modeling nuclear detonation physics. Iran has never permitted IAEA inspectors into the underground sections, claiming they contain conventional defense research exempt from nuclear safeguards. The Israeli munitions employed were almost certainly GBU-72 advanced 5K penetrator weapons, 5,000-pound bunker busters, thrusters using a hardened steel casing and delayed action fusing designed to punch through layered reinforced concrete before detonation. Each GBU-72 can penetrate approximately 60 meters of reinforced concrete or 30 meters of granite, making them capable of reaching Iran's deepest underground facilities. The strike likely involved 4 to 6 munitions to ensure penetration and destruction of critical underground infrastructure. The F-35I Adir fighters that delivered the strike represent Israel's most advanced deep strike capability. These are not standard F-35As, but heavily modified variants with Israeli-designed electronic warfare suites, extended-range fuel tanks, and weapons bay modifications, allowing carriage of larger munitions. The Adir's stealth characteristics combined with standoff jamming from electronic warfare aircraft created the penetration corridor that defeated Iran's air defense network. The route almost certainly transited either Jordanian or Saudi airspace, both of which have tacitly cooperated with previous Israeli operations against Iranian nuclear infrastructure. The fact that all strike aircraft returned safely indicates either passive acquiescence or active coordination with nations whose official positions oppose Israeli military action, but whose strategic interests align with preventing Iranian nuclear weapons. Here's why this matters strategically and why the next 72 hours could determine whether the Middle East slides to the largest regional war since 1973. From Israel's perspective, the strike represents the culmination of years of intelligence development combined with a rapidly closing window of opportunity. Israeli intelligence services, primarily Mossad's specialized nuclear collection units, have maintained human sources inside Iran's nuclear program for over a decade. Those sources provided the targeting data, making this strike possible, identifying not just the compound location, but the specific underground sections containing irreplaceable equipment and personnel. Israel's strategic calculation rests on a simple premise. Iran is between 6 and 18 months from nuclear weapons breakout capability, and diplomatic engagement has failed to halt Iranian progress. The Abraham Accords and subsequent normalization with Saudi Arabia created regional alignment against Iranian hegemony. But normalized relations also created vulnerability because Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates cannot be seen publicly supporting Israeli military action, even when they privately welcome Iranian setbacks. Israel struck now because the intelligence window was open. The tactical conditions were favorable, and the strategic clock was running out. Israeli defense planners assessed that Iran's nuclear program has reached such sophistication that another 18 months of unimpeded development would create irreversible capabilities resistant to even the most sophisticated military strikes. The decision to strike during a period when IAEA inspectors were actively in country, conducting separate verification visits, was calculated to maximize international legitimacy through third-party confirmation of the target's nature. From Iran's perspective, this strike represents an existential humiliation that demands response, even if response risks catastrophic escalation. The Supreme Leader's legitimacy rests partly on defiance of Israeli and American pressure. A strike on Tehran itself, destroying nuclear infrastructure, cannot go unanswered without appearing weak to domestic hardliners and regional adversaries. But Iran faces an impossible calculus. Proportional retaliation against Israeli nuclear facilities is impossible because Israel's Dimona reactor is even more hardened and defended than Iranian facilities. Disproportionate escalation through ballistic missile strikes on Israeli cities risks triggering full American intervention. Limited retaliation through proxy forces like Hezbollah or attacks on Gulf shipping might satisfy domestic political requirements while avoiding direct Israeli-Iranian warfare. But such limited response could be interpreted as weakness, encouraging future strikes. According to Dr. Ariani Tabatabai, Senior Fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies and former Chief of Staff for the Pentagon's Office of the Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, the strike places Iran in a strategic trap where all available options carry severe consequences. She analyzed the developing crisis and concluded that Iran must respond to maintain deterrence credibility. But any response strong enough to satisfy domestic audiences risks triggering escalation spirals that Iran cannot win against combined Israeli and potentially American military power. There are 3 scenarios emerging from the smoking crater in northern Tehran, and the probability distribution is tighter than any crisis I've tracked in 5 years, covering Middle East security dynamics. Scenario 1 envisions diplomatic de-escalation through back-channel negotiations and international pressure, and I assess probability at 28%. For this pathway to succeed, Iran would need to conduct symbolic retaliation that demonstrates defiance without causing mass Israeli casualties. This might involve ballistic missile strikes on unpopulated areas or cyber attacks on Israeli infrastructure that create disruption without deaths. Simultaneously, the United States and European powers would need to offer Iran some combination of sanctions relief, nuclear deal resurrection, or security guarantees that allow Iranian leadership to claim they extracted concessions through strength. The challenge is that Israel just demonstrated it can strike Iran's most sensitive facilities with impunity, fundamentally undermining Iranian deterrence. Why would Israel agree to diplomatic constraints after proving military options work? And why would Iran trust diplomatic processes that failed to prevent this strike? The scenario requires both sides to step back from the brink, despite having committed actions that make stepping back politically difficult. China and Russia would likely facilitate such back channels because neither benefits from regional war, disrupting energy markets, and distracting from Ukraine and Taiwan, respectively. The 28% probability reflects the fact that rational actors sometimes choose de-escalation, even when emotions favor war, but the window is narrow and closing fast. Scenario 2 maps controlled military escalation, where both sides conduct limited strikes within defined parameters, and I assess probability at 42%, making this the most likely trajectory. Iran launches ballistic missile strikes against Israeli military targets, possibly air bases that launch the Tehran strike, or missile defense batteries in northern Israel. The strikes are carefully calibrated to hit military infrastructure while avoiding civilian casualties that would trigger overwhelming Israeli retaliation. Israel responds with additional strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, IRGC bases, or weapons depots, maintaining focus on military and nuclear targets while avoiding regime leadership or mass civilian casualties. This tit-for-tat escalation continues for 1 to 2 weeks, with each side demonstrating capability and resolve while signaling limits through target selection. The United States deploys additional carrier strike groups and air defense batteries to the region, both deterring catastrophic escalation and preparing for potential intervention if either side crosses red lines. Eventually, both sides exhaust politically useful targets, recognize that continuation risks losing control of escalation, and accept mediated ceasefire that allows each to claim victory. Israel claims it set back Iran's nuclear program by years. Iran claims it struck Israeli military targets with impunity, demonstrating that aggression carries costs. Both claims contain elements of truth and elements of propaganda, but the mutual face-saving enables de-escalation. The 42% probability reflects historical patterns where regional powers engage in limited warfare, short of total conflict, particularly when major powers signal that unlimited war will not be tolerated. The scenario's weakness is that it requires sustained rational decision-making during periods of high emotion and domestic political pressure, when leaders face strong incentives to escalate beyond original intentions. Scenario 3 outlines catastrophic escalation, where miscalculation or deliberate choices produce regional war, potentially drawing in the United States, and I assess probability at 30%. This scenario begins with Iranian retaliation causing mass Israeli civilian casualties, perhaps ballistic missiles striking Tel Aviv, or Hezbollah rockets overwhelming Iron Dome. Israel responds with massive air campaign against Iranian leadership and military infrastructure. Iran activates its full proxy network, with Hezbollah launching thousands of rockets into Israel, Houthi forces attacking Red Sea shipping, and Iraqi militias striking marine forces. The United States conducts strikes against Iranian missile batteries and naval bases. Oil prices spike above $130 per barrel as markets price in Strait of Hormuz closure. Within 2 weeks, multi-front warfare involves Israel, Iran, the United States, and proxy forces. The 30% probability reflects genuine risk that crossing thresholds like striking nuclear command centers erodes psychological barriers against total war. Watch for 5 critical indicators in the next 24 to 72 hours that will reveal which scenario is materializing. First, Iranian leadership visibility. If Supreme Leader Khamenei makes a public speech within 48 hours, the content and tone will signal whether Iran seeks escalation or off-ramp. Bellicose rhetoric about destroying Israel indicates escalation track. Emphasis on strategic patience and long-term resistance suggests Iran is absorbing the blow while planning calibrated response. If Khamenei does not appear publicly, that absence itself signals either physical injury from the strike or political paralysis within Iranian leadership about response options. Second, American military deployments. If the Pentagon announces deployment of additional carrier strike groups, bomber task forces, or air defense batteries to the region, that signals American assessment that escalation probability is high, and American forces need positioning for potential intervention. Conversely, if no major deployments occur, that suggests American intelligence assesses Iran will conduct limited retaliation within manageable parameters. Third, oil market reactions. If crude prices spike above $95 per barrel, markets are pricing in conflict probability above 50% and expecting potential disruption to Persian Gulf production or transportation. Sustained prices below $85 suggest markets believe diplomatic or limited military resolution remains likely. Fourth, IAEA inspector access. If Iran permits IAEA inspectors immediate access to the struck facility, that signals Iran has nothing to hide and seeks to leverage international opinion against Israeli aggression. If Iran denies or delays access, that suggests the facility contained weapons development work that Iran wants to conceal or clean up before international verification. Fifth, Israeli mobilization. If Israel activates reserve units, deploys additional Iron Dome batteries to northern cities, or issues civil defense guidance to populations near Lebanese border, that signals Israeli military planners expect Hezbollah involvement and are preparing for multi-front warfare. Watch those 5 indicators closely because they will reveal whether we're heading toward negotiated resolution or regional conflagration. The strike on Tehran's nuclear command center just ended. The IAEA confirms damage. Iran promises unprecedented retaliation. Israel demonstrates it can hit any facility in Iran with precision and impunity. The fundamental deterrence calculations that have prevented full-scale Israeli-Iranian warfare for 4 decades just changed permanently. I'm tracking this minute by minute with sources monitoring diplomatic channels, satellite imagery of military movements, and intelligence assessments from defense networks across 3 continents. When Iran retaliates, when Israel strikes again, when the United States deploys forces or brokers ceasefire, you'll understand it here first with the technical detail and strategic analysis that mainstream coverage cannot provide. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on all notifications because the next 72 hours will determine whether this ends with diplomatic resolution or regional war. You need to understand what happens next, and you need analysis that goes beyond surface level reporting. Hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment answering these questions. Do you think Iran's retaliation will be limited and symbolic or massive and unrestrained? Do you think Israel struck with American coordination and approval or acted unilaterally, risking American opposition? Do you think this strike actually set back Iran's nuclear program significantly or just hardened Iranian determination to achieve weapons capability? I read every comment, and I want to know what you're seeing from your perspective. Thanks for watching. Israel just crossed a line that has never been crossed. Iran must respond. The entire Middle East security architecture hangs in the balance. The next 72 hours will determine everything.